The most dangerous manipulators are not the people who openly try to control you. They are the people who make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Because obvious manipulation is easy to notice, but manipulation hidden inside kindness, that destroys people slowly, and most victims never even realize what is happening until years later. Have you ever met someone who seemed incredibly caring in the beginning? They always checked on you, always helped you, always gave advice, always made you feel emotionally safe. But over time, something started feeling heavy around them. You started feeling guilty saying no. You started feeling responsible for their emotions. You started over-explaining your decisions. You started feeling anxious every time they became disappointed. And eventually you realized something uncomfortable. Their kindness did not feel freeing anymore. It felt controlling. That is one of the biggest signs of manipulative kindness. Real kindness gives people freedom. Manipulative kindness creates emotional obligation. That is the difference most people fail to notice. And toxic people understand something about empathetic people that empathetic people often do not understand about themselves. Empathetic people hate disappointing others. They hate conflict. They hate feeling like the bad person. And manipulators use that instinct constantly, not through force, through guilt. That is why emotional manipulation rarely sounds aggressive. Sometimes it sounds soft. I just miss the old you. I guess you don't care anymore. After everything I've done for you. And if you are emotionally kind, those sentences hit hard. Because manipulative people know exactly where your guilt lives. They know your empathy will make you question yourself before questioning them. That is why fake kindness is so dangerous. It lowers your guard. Most people expect toxic people to look toxic, but many manipulators look emotionally generous at first. Supportive, patient, helpful, safe. And that illusion makes people trust them deeply. But here is what many people realize too late. Some people help you because helping creates emotional access. Some people overgive because overgiving creates emotional leverage later. And once emotional leverage exists, control becomes easier. Think about how certain people react when you finally create boundaries. Healthy people may feel disappointed sometimes, but they still respect your decision. Manipulative people often react differently. They become cold, passive-aggressive, emotionally dramatic. Suddenly, they act hurt in ways that make you feel guilty for protecting your own peace. Why? Because your boundaries threaten their control. That is why manipulators often confuse guilt with love. They want you to feel emotionally responsible for their emotional state. And once you feel responsible, you become easier to control. This is how many people slowly lose themselves in toxic relationships. Not through fear, through emotional obligation. They stop asking, "What feels healthy for me?" and start asking, "How do I avoid disappointing them?" That shift changes everything. Because now your decisions are no longer guided by peace. They are guided by guilt. And guilt is one of the strongest emotional control mechanisms in human psychology, especially for emotionally caring people. That is why kind people often stay too long in unhealthy situations. They keep trying to understand, keep trying to fix things, keep trying to avoid hurting others. Meanwhile, toxic people quietly exploit that compassion. And the scary part is, many manipulators do not even fully realize they are manipulating. Some people learned very early in life that guilt creates control, that emotional withdrawal creates power, that disappointment creates pressure. So they repeat those patterns automatically in adulthood. Every time you pull away, they suddenly become emotional. Every time you prioritize yourself, they suddenly feel abandoned. Every time you stop overgiving, they make you feel selfish. And because you care, your instinct immediately becomes, "How do I fix this?" That is the trap. You start carrying emotional weight that was never yours to carry. That is why emotionally manipulated people often feel exhausted all the time, because they are constantly managing emotions that do not belong to them, and eventually they stop trusting themselves. They begin second-guessing every boundary, every decision, every feeling, because manipulative kindness creates confusion, and confused people become easier to control. That is why emotionally healthy people become very careful around guilt-based relationships. Not cold, aware. Because emotionally mature people understand something important. Love should not feel like emotional debt. Real love does not punish boundaries. Real love does not require self-betrayal. Real love does not disappear the moment you stop sacrificing yourself. But manipulators often depend on sacrifice, because sacrifice creates access. Access creates influence, and influence creates control. That is why emotionally grounded people eventually stop responding automatically to guilt, not because they stop caring, but because they finally realize something life-changing. You are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotional reactions to your boundaries. People are allowed to feel disappointed. People are allowed to disagree. People are allowed to have emotions. But that does not mean you must abandon yourself to keep them comfortable. That is not kindness. That is self-betrayal. And manipulative people depend on your fear of self-prioritization. They depend on your fear of looking selfish. They depend on your inability to tolerate other people's disappointment. Because once you become comfortable disappointing manipulative people, their control starts collapsing. That is why boundaries expose people faster than words ever will. The moment you say no, the real dynamic appears. Healthy people adjust. Manipulative people pressure. Healthy people communicate. Manipulative people guilt trip. Healthy people respect your peace. Manipulative people take your boundaries personally. And once you see that pattern clearly, you cannot unsee it anymore. That is why awareness changes relationships permanently, because now you stop confusing emotional pressure with emotional depth. You stop confusing guilt with love. You stop confusing self-sacrifice with loyalty. And slowly, you begin reclaiming emotional freedom. That is what manipulators fear most: emotionally free people. People who no longer need approval to trust themselves. People who no longer panic every time someone becomes disappointed. People who can stay calm while someone else tries to create guilt. Because emotionally free people are extremely difficult to control. And the moment you stop responding automatically to guilt, your entire life changes. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for healthy boundaries. You stop carrying emotional burdens that were never yours. And for the first time in a very long time, you begin feeling peace instead of pressure around relationships. That is how you know healing has started. Because healthy love brings calm. Not guilt, not fear, not emotional exhaustion. And real kindness never makes you feel trapped for protecting your own peace.